Okay, hello ladies and gentlemen. Um, I'm back. I did one of these videos for 3.0 Sumero when it first came out, and I thought I'd do another video, my impressions and my thoughts on 4.0 Fontaine. And so here I am. Again, I guess I'll do a self-intro. I'm nobody of consequence. Just I work in the game industry. I've done a little bit of everything towards creating video games, and I'm just giving I'm a big fan of this particular game, Genshin Impact. I'm just giving my personal opinions and thoughts the uh, on the work that MiHoYo has created. And I had a few sections, a few topics that I wanted to talk about, and just get out of my head, get them recorded down, and hopefully this might inform people who are still on the fence about playing or coming back to the game. Or maybe even if someone at MiHoYo sees this, they can use it as a form of feedback. This is just me, mostly just me trying to get my thoughts out of my head and into recording. So my initial impressions of Fontaine 4.0 Genshin Impact. Um, I'll start off with the smaller things. I'll work on to the bigger things, the things that have more significance to me. So the first thing was the improvement to the character select screen. In 4.0, they made a few just kind of improvements for the user experience. One of those being the new character select screen. The background actually changes based on the zone, the area that you're in, which is kind of cool. And you have all these characters, and when you select a character, they have a little intro animation, which I thought was really cool. Like it serves absolutely no functional purpose whatsoever, but it is just kind of a nice little stylish little fix. They get style points for that. My one little critique would be that I think that the characters are too far. They're too far in this particular screen. I think the camera could be zoomed in a bit more. The characters seem a little small to me. Smaller than they were before. I think there's room for the camera to zoom in a bit more. But that was a nice little extra style flourish that they put on into the user experience for 4.0. And speaking of character select, well, that'll lead into Fontaine's characters. The first characters to release with 4.0 was Linny and Lynette, and then reruns of Yelan. And I think we just have a couple more days before we get into the next banner. This is currently towards the end of the first half of 4.0. The characters for Fontaine, there's the ones that have been released are Linny and Lynette. And at first I wasn't particularly interested in almost any of the characters for Fontaine. The aesthetic just didn't appeal to me whatsoever. The whole steampunk underwater theme. I wasn't really a fan of that. Still am not really a fan of that. But even though I don't have much interest in the character's appearance, the story that the character stories and the relationships they have with each other in Fontaine throughout the Fontaine story, the main quest, it's actually made them. It actually adds to their appeal, I would say, quite a bit. So even though you might not be a fan of their visuals, once you get to know them and in the story, and you've gone on adventures with them, they endear themselves to you a bit more once you get to learn their backgrounds. Linny and Lynette, are the ones for the 4.0, and then we have more coming up. It's yet unannounced, unknown which where each character will fall in, but the upcoming characters. I don't know if would this be considered a spoiler? Perhaps not. I mean, the upcoming characters, most of them have been already featured in the main story, so I think it's okay. But yeah, after seeing Linny and Lynette's roles in the stories of Fontaine, their appeal has definitely gone up, and I think that's been the case for a number of other characters. We've got let's see, Nouvellette. Oh, I failed. Nouvellette, the Chief Justice. I wasn't the least bit interested in him before, and yet when I saw what happened in the story, my interest in him kind of went up a little bit. There's also Navia. Her story makes her a really much more appealing character. She's much more precious than I gave her initial credit for. There's Farina. When I first met her, I thought she was annoying as hell. I didn't like her. But after seeing kind of what her role is in Fontaine and kind of how the other characters regard her, now she's grown on me. She's grown on me, I'll say. She's not as insufferable as I initially thought, and I think there's a lot more potential for this to be shown in the story. We'll see what happens. What other characters there is? Arlecchino. Well, all I can really say about Arlecchino is I'm really looking forward to her. Her character is the only one that has a visual design. Her visuals are the only ones that I'm really actually interested in, that I'm actually looking forward to for Fontaine. In terms of my initial interest in like the leaked characters, she was the only one that stood out to me, and I'm really curious to see what happens with her going forward. There's Freminet. Freminet, again, like visually, I'm not interested, but maybe he'll have a character story, or background story, which makes him more appealing, which makes him more endearing. Where's Charlotte? We've met Charlotte before. Again, not the slight bit interested, but maybe we'll see part of her story, part of her background that'll make her a little more than she appears. And I think another character that we got to see in Fontaine thus far is Chlorinde, I think that's her name. And again, like same story. It's the same story for all the characters. I'm like their visual design. Look at a glance, they don't seem appealing to me at all. I'm not interested. But once you see their stories and see where they fall in Fontaine, my interest is doubled. So we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to seeing where these characters go in the upcoming stories for 4.1 and 2 and future patches. That's all I have to really rant about, haphazardly say about the characters in Fontaine thus far. There's more characters coming up. I'm trying not to spoil it by saying which ones appear and which ones don't. So I'm keeping the selection of characters that I'm addressing kind of limited. The next thing I wanted to say was combat. So combat in Fontaine has not really changed. Like the overland combat, same as always, and there's no new element or anything. So it's not like Sumeru where you had new dendro reactions. But there is the what do they call it? The Uisa and Numa reactions. So Fontaine characters can have kind of like either a dark or a light alignment with their attacks, and they will generate either Uisa. Is it Uisa? Am I saying that right? Uisa, Osa, Uisa reactions, or they can stimulate Numa reactions. there are gimmicks in the world that will react to either one. And personally, I'm not really a fan of this way of implementing it. Like, I feel like this is a precursor to celestial and abyssal energies. Like, all like in the future, characters will have a either maybe they'll get to choose or maybe they'll just be set by default. Characters will have an abyssal or a celestial alignment, and I feel like this Uisa and Numa infusion is kind of a precursor to that, kind of testing the waters to see how that's received. And I think it wasn't implemented right because I personally don't like the fact that the only real value that this adds to combat is that it reacts to certain types of enemies, certain types of gimmicks. I think that it would have been much better if they had made Uisa and Numa actually affect the character's skills, either like adding additional functionality or buffing them in some way. Um, Personally, it doesn't really matter to me if like the enemy reacts to Numa or Uisa. I think it's better if the abilities themselves change based on which alignment the character has. I think that if I really think that in the future expansions of Genshin Impact, there will be abyssal and celestial energies, and characters will be able to either choose or they'll be set by default. But I think that um, these infusions, these additional modifiers, need to affect characters, their abilities, not enemies. That'd be the one criticism I have of the new combat mechanic. I don't know if I can call it a new combat mechanic because it's damn near irrelevant for most leveled parties. Like you don't even need to worry about it for most of the time. There are certain gimmicks that it uses that it reacts to, but that's it. So we got through Uisa and Numa. I would like to talk now. This is what I play Genshin for in the first place. Is the environment. I really like the world. Fontaine's visual presentation is much better, I think, than what we've had in the past two expansions, Inazuma and Sumeru. I think Fontaine is visually, it's more appealing. I will say that this almost feels like what Mondstadt kind of should have been. Like you can tell like this is much more visually reminiscent of Mondstadt, but you can tell that they've learned a lot in since then and like kind of upgraded uh, the what do I say? They've upgraded the visual appeal of wide open vistas like Mondstadt had. I like being able to look out over a great distance and seeing just all the places. I like seeing green fields and expansive, like great expanses. That to me holds a lot of visual appeal. And we got that. We didn't get that hardly at all in Inazuma. It was just islands and rock faces, cliffs to climb. And same in Sumeru. It didn't. You could climb to the top of a mountain and look out, but like there were a lot of ravines and there was not very much like flat, like this, like flat expanses to really traverse. It was all mountain climbing or cave delving, cavern. What do you call it? Caverning. But I like how they've opened up in Fontaine, and you can actually look out over relatively flatter expanses and see what's ahead. Also, I like how Fontaine as a nation as a whole is on a raised plateau, and you can really see that actually. I'm surprised they're able to like express it so well that you can really tell like this is at a higher elevation than the other nations. Um, it's actually really hard to put my finger on like describe how exactly they made this scene like make the visuals of Fontaine match the actual elevation that it's at. That's actually quite impressive how they're able to do that. Because if you look out over the edge of Fontaine, over the, I guess if you were to go back to the um, Maritime Harbor, you'll see that it's just a big waterfall, and the entire nation is elevated above the ocean. I wonder if I can look out over. Yeah, like you're way above. Your ground level is way above the ground level of other nations. As you can see, like Leeway's over there, and it goes down into ravines and valleys, and by contrast, um, Fontaine is a plateau riddled with caves and stuff, but I was really impressed that they were able to keep that in mind when they were making it and express that higher elevation in their visuals. Uh, I think that overall, honestly, this seems a little small. Fontaine, the above ground Fontaine seems a little bit small to me, to be honest. Even with the underwater zones, compared to like Sumeru's first release, I feel like Fontaine is smaller, but but there is a lot surrounding Fontaine that promises more expansion, I should say. Um, you can look out over to the north or places outside of the current boundaries of the nation, and you can see where they're headed. Like that mountain, you can't go all the way up that mountain yet, but I feel like that's going to be something in the future. This is a bad place to look out at a distance. I wonder where would be a better place. Top of a mountain would be nice. You've got strange structures out in the background. So you can tell like they know where they're going. They know where they want to go. It's just a matter of making the content in a timely fashion and releasing it. I'm expecting Fontaine to be at least double in size, maybe triple in size. Current borders I thought upon release were a little bit narrow though. Exploration. Well, I very much appreciate not having to climb so many cliff faces. That's something that I got real old, especially in Inazuma, where you're just climbing up sheer vertical drops, sheer vertical faces, and it's just not. I got tired of that. They didn't quite manage to eliminate that in Sumeru. A lot of mountain climbing. The first desert release with Deshret's Tomb was good. I loved that one. But the deserts after that, there was still a lot of cliff climbing. I got tired of that real quick. Here, not quite so much. You can actually look out, and it's more just kind of traveling up gentle slopes, I will say. So I'm glad that they changed that. Underwater exploration is, as you can see, it's really beautiful. They did a good job with expressing the making the underwater environment inviting, I guess I should say, friendly. Having a really far view distance really helps also in keeping that sense of sometimes if you have a really deep chasm below you, there's actually a phobia that inspires, and I think they did a pretty good job of avoiding that. Though I kind of want to see some places with that inspires that phobia because it's stimulating in a sense. I would like to see a big giant hole where I can't see the bottom and be scared out of my mind. But underwater exploration is about as good as it could be, I think. They did a really good job. I really like being able to like launch out of the water like a dolphin. This just feels so good. I'm really sad that you can only do it with Fontaine characters and the Traveler. I really wanted to see Kokomi do this, but only Fontaine characters are able to do the dolphin dive, I guess you would say. Um, combat underwater, they they did something. They got it to work as best they could, I think. I think it would have been much more impressive if they were able to make like underwater variants for each character's abilities, or at least one of each character's abilities, because right now you can't use character abilities underwater. They made a completely different way to fight underwater, and I just think, yeah, I guess that's fair. Actually, trying to like implement an underwater variant of every character's ability, and like you have to have that for every character going forward. That would be a gargantuan undertaking to do that. So I guess they did the best they could with the constraints that were posed on them. But still, I think it would have been impressive if they were actually able to do that, to make underwater variant for at least one of each character's skills, so that each character could have their own flavor of underwater combat. Because as it is, every character does the same combat routine as any other character underwater. Another thing that I wanted to mention about the environment was the vehicles. There's the, well, as you can see there, there's the waterway, and there's the I think they call it the aqua bus. You can take the aqua bus to different places, main areas in Fontaine along those waterways. I was surprised. It was surprisingly pleasant. Like if you're not in a hurry and you just want to sit back and enjoy the atmosphere, it's a great way to do it. I was really impressed with how well they were, how well the vehicle gameplay was when in this game when they first implemented it in the summer event. The roller coaster event was unexpectedly pleasant. The aquabus was nice, and they also have like these airships that kind of go along a set course, and you ride them to their destination. And that's also like if you're not in a hurry, if you're just sitting back enjoying the atmosphere, it's also a really good, just a really good, really pleasant experience. I was surprised. So that does it for exploration. Now for the most, what I consider to be the most important parts of Genshin Impact, the story and the quests. Uh, so story and want to try not to spoil anything. Um, I'm just going to give a really general, a broad sense of a really broad feedback on how I think they did with the storytelling. Um, so thinking back to the previous expansions, and then comparing them to Fontaine's story, that what I've experienced so far, I've done a lot of the world quests, the character quests, and I finished the main story to the latest stage so far. Story in Fontaine is it's more cohesive, and I think it's a lot more understandable. There's less abstract content than there was in Sumeru. I think overall it's definitely improved. With Sumeru, there was like too much was like you couldn't tell if it got resolved or not, or like the resolution wasn't really satisfying. You still had more questions after you finished the quest than when you started, which was really like got. It's a recurring theme across many of Genshin stories. It's kind of got annoying. With Fontaine, you get a lot more answers. There are a lot more answers in the Fontaine story than there were in the previous stories. Questions, the questions that you have when going into a story, they're more clear cut. They're easier to understand, and the resolutions are also equally clear cut and easy to understand. I appreciate that. There's no reason for that particular cut of content to be ambiguous. There are stories that do benefit from ambiguity, but I don't think that Genshin's main story is one of those. I think I was pleasantly surprised by the twists and turns that the story took. I think that there is ample the topics themselves that they deal with in the story are pretty interesting. They are definitely there are a few controversial topics, and I think that they approach it in a way that is stimulating. There are there are some controversial themes about that are that ha, that there's some controversial themes presented in the story of the main story of Genshin Impact, and also in the character stories and side and just all, the world quest as well. And I think that they're presented in a way that's fairly easy to understand. There were a few points in the world quest where there was a name dropped that I didn't like that had never I don't think I'd never seen before. I'm just wondering where the hell like where it came from. But for most part, the stories overall are more cohesive. They're easy to understand, and you won't leave kind of like feeling confused. Unlike Sumeru, where I feel like a lot of people with the story just kind of ended up feeling like they were more confused than when they started, which is not how you want to be feeling when you walk away when you've completed the whole entire game story. But yeah, honestly, I would have to say that the world quests are probably better than the main quests. That's kind of how MiHoYo's been doing thus far since Sumeru. The Sumeru world quest was really interesting, really engaging. Same thing here. The world quest was actually really interesting, and it's also easy to follow. And I feel like it's better. It's more stimulating than the main quest, I think. Which good. It's a good and a bad thing. Like they put most of their budget in making the animations and the voiceovers for the main quest. But in terms of actual story content, the world quests are better. It'd be nice to have those really good stories, voiced and have little cutscene, have properly made cutscenes. But fat chance of that. Let's see. That's about all that I have to say about 4.0 thus far. I just went through this little checklist I made for myself, got through the character select screen, the improvements, talked about upcoming characters, talked about combat, talked about environment, talked about exploration in that environment, and we just got through stories and quests. So yeah, main points that I'm going to conclude with were that the environment is much more open. There's expansive vistas that I enjoy a lot more compared to Sumeru. I would say that's an overall improvement. Characters, I wasn't interested in them at first, but after seeing where they are in Fontaine, their role to play in the stories to come, I think that uh, they're much more appealing now that I know them a little better. The new Numa Uisa system is kind of uh, I feel like it's a precursor for another similar system in the future for all of the characters that we will encounter in Genshin Impact. I would rather see it affect character abilities rather than react with enemies. And exploration, underwater exploration. Personally, I've never been a fan of underwater exploration in any game, but I think that the way they've gone about it in the Genshin Impact is about as good as it could have been. Um, a lot of people are really into water exploration, and if that's the case, if you are one who enjoys water exploration, Genshin Impact probably will scratch that itch. Story and quests are much more user-friendly, easier to understand, more clear-cut. You're not left with more questions than when you started. You're still left with questions, but not quite as many, which was a big annoyance in Sumeru. Even though their storytelling in Sumeru got better from Inazuma, it's gotten even better now. They're really improving on what they've done and improving on what they know thus far. And I can't wait to see like where where it'll take us We have a lot of zones, a lot of landmarks surrounding the current playable area of Fontaine, and I'm really curious to see uh, how those places will fill in to our journey and how their stories will unfold. The environmental storytelling that they've been able to do in Fontaine is significantly better than what were able to do in previous expansions. And I see a lot of potential in the future patches 1.4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and etc. going forward. So here's a cheers to a good job done. And that's my review of Fontaine 4.0. So thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying 4.0 as much as I am. Looking forward to 4.1. If you have any thoughts, comments, things you agree with, things you disagree with, post them in the comments. And enjoy Genshin 4.0. See you all later. Goodbye.